look at their use of Scrum and Kanban, I look at what does the career trajectory look like? What does the organizational setup look like? What does the what do the rewards look like? How does technology play a role in this? How does culture play a role in this? So really trying to set up every facet of an organization to optimize value delivery, with one important caveat. I try not to bother people too much while doing so. I have a firm belief that trying to change people by forcing change upon them is the completely wrong way to go about it. So what I try to do, wherever possible, is try to adjust the system so it's actually a little bit easier for people to focus on value without having to worry too much about their career. Though, quite honestly, I see Greg in the audience here. Greg's been a victim of mine for the past 2 years at my current assignment, so I'll leave it up to him to give you some reflection on how well that's been going. See, he's all aboard. So we'll do questions and stuff after the presentation, because right now I'm in a good flow. So what we'll be talking about today, this is stuff I've seen happen quite often. In my sordid career, I have done active agile coaching, but one of the things that has happened every so often is I get flown in for a second opinion. So a company's been trying to do something agile for a while, or maybe just even trying to grow or trying to be more effective. They've been getting advice from external coaches or consultants, and they just want someone from the outside to go and have a look at things and have an opinion on things. And I love having opinions. It comes with being Dutch. So I've made a career out of that. And these are some of the patterns that I've seen happen over the course of it. So specifically, these are things that you, yes, you probably do or let happen that complicate or even prevent value delivery at times. Now, what is important to know here, this is not your fault. Actually, many of the things that we'll be talking about today are just human building errors. They come from our psychology. Believe it or not, a group of people that evolved to deal with life on the plains doesn't deal with highly complex work all that well. It's just not something we evolved for. So we'll be touching on some of these things, but have a little bit of mercy on yourself as you hear about all of these 4 things and reflect on yourself. So each of these 4 I will accompany with a little bit of a story, so they become a bit more tangible for all of you. So let's get started. First one, I was called into an organization that was having some difficulties. They were several months overdue on delivering a system. Their estimates were wildly unreliable. The backlog was massive. Morale was low. Everyone was unhappy. It's not your organization, by the way. This is a few years ago, but I can imagine this is very recognizable to many people. The interesting thing is, when I actually started looking at this organization and how they worked, what I found was that they were working in many different ways. So some of the teams were using something resembling Scrum. Some of the teams were using something resembling Kanban. At the same time, there was also project management still going on, and those teams had to report into a project manager as part of that program. There was also a lean program still working at the time. And all of these things were kind of conflicting, to the point that at one point I calculated that for every developer, there were about 3 managers that they had to report into. Rumors that this was a Dutch government organization, I can neither confirm nor deny. But, having found this out, they were very behind on schedule, and they were asking me, well, how do we deal with that? And, do we train more people? And I was like, and then I was talking to a few people, and I said, we can train people, or we can throw more people to the problem. But really, the issue here is that you have 3 different governance models at the same time. Do you want to maybe, pick one, or devise something new so that we can at least offer some clarity, and we don't have like this many people in charge of, well, really not a lot of people that actually have to do work. And the response I got there was, no, this got brought up every so often. We are not going to be discussing this approach again. Recognizable? Yeah, unfortunately so. Unfortunately so. So I started wondering, right? What is causing this kind of response, right? When everyone sees what's going on, what is causing this response? Why do we not want to go back to what is happening? And at first I thought, well, this is a large organization. There's always a lot of internal politics at at large organizations. There's a lot of psychological unsafety. So, mistakes happen, but people don't want to admit that mistakes have happened. Maybe that's it. But it turned out that was too simple an answer. You see, the problem that I was facing and that they were facing was a basic human one. And well, let me give an example. Can I get a volunteer from the audience for a small experiment? It's only going to hurt a little bit. Aliona, yes.
I'm here.
All right. Can I ask you a personal question?
Go ahead.
All right. Can you give me an example of a good choice and a bad choice you made in 2021?
Does it have to be only 2021?
Can be whatever you like. I just need an example of a good choice and a bad choice.
Okay, well, every evening's choice to eat something sweet before going to bed is probably a bad choice, as the result of weighing in the morning clearly shows me, right? The good choice would be to do something about it, like add activity.
All right.
Working out.
Thank you, Aliona. You answered my question exactly the way I expected it.
Now I'm going to be hurt, right?
Well, because maybe the rest already realized, but you didn't exactly answer my question. Right? The interesting thing, what you just did is it's a bad choice because of the result. Mm-hmm. And that kind of logic works if you're playing chess. Right? Chess is a game of perfect information. Right? You know exactly what the board looks like. Your opponent knows exactly what the board looks like, and the rules are known. Right? So if you lose a game of chess, clearly you have made bad choices along the way because it is a game of perfect information. So the quality of the choice directly leads to the quality of the result. If the quality of the result is bad, clearly the choice was bad. But that's not real life. Real life is poker. You are playing a game of imperfect information. You don't know all of the variables. And so to judge the quality of your choice based on the outcomes is very, very illogical. Right? You're assuming you know more than you actually do. The reality is sometimes you make all the right choices and get a bad outcome. Sometimes you make bad choices that lead to a great outcome. Right? These things are separate, and that is exactly what was happening in this organization. They had made choices along the way during their corporate evolution. They had chosen to do a lean approach. They may have chosen to do a lean approach for all the right reasons at the time. It was a good choice, just had a bad outcome. Right? They may have chosen to start working with more deliberate project management. It may have been the right choice for all the right reasons. Just didn't result in the kind of outcome that they were looking for. Right? But this idea that the world is controllable and knowable is something very fundamental to people, right? We do not deal with complexity very well. right? And this has been proven psychologically as well, right? It actually turns out that your brain spends a considerable amount of effort trying to make the world less complex than it really is, right? Because the brain takes up a lot of energy, so it likes to do a lot of automatic things. So and this is very valuable if you're still living on the plains, right? If you walk into the tall grass and you get bitten by a snake and you see someone die, or you spend a few days in pain, then you learn very quickly, okay, I should stay away from the tall grass. There's snakes in there, right? But nowadays, the world is so complex, we simply can't do that anymore, right? So this idea of playing chess is very, very counterproductive. Instead, we should approach the world as though we're playing poker, right? We do not know the outcome. We are betting continuously. Now, the only way to control risk in that scenario, right, to make sure that on average we have better outcomes, is to make smaller bets, right? Smaller decisions, right? Don't go all in on your first hand. So playing that game, right, starts with really understanding what type of game you're playing, right? What the world actually looks like. The world is not predictable, it is not stable, and as we have seen in the past 3 years, small things can very quickly change everything you know about the world. Right? There can be a virus outbreak in China that causes all of us to work from home for the next 2 years. You know, there could be a powerful man in Russia that has tremendous penis envy and feels incompetent and wants to invade another country to feel better about himself, right? We can't account for all these things. We have to make smaller bets. Right? And this is very well described in Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets, right? Good artists make stuff, great artists steal. Thank you. If you're going to play a game, right, in a certain domain, so if you're playing a game in the complex domain, where there's always more that we don't know, and where the things that we do know may not remain valid for a very long time, we need to find a strategy to play that game, right? Scrum is one of those, Kanban is one of those, Crystal is one of those, but when you start playing a game, right, when you know the type of game and you know the strategy, really understand the rules of the game that you're playing and create a good betting strategy as a result. So, summarizing there, the problem is for most of the work that anyone does here is there's no certainty whatsoever. The only two guarantees in life are, well, you're going to die. That's going to happen to all of us. And before that time, the government is going to want a lot of your money. You know, that's the two guarantees. Everything else is up for grabs. The problem, of course, is that most people are just placing bets blindly. Right? You do that both in your personal life, right? By going all in on certain big decisions, by not taking a step back when it turns out one of your decisions turns out to be wrong. But also in most major corporations, right? How many of us have been on a project that's been going on for 6 months or a year or 2 years where everyone already knows, right, it's not going to work. And yet we have to finish it. Why? Because we started, right? And we couldn't have been wrong. Right? So this is much more than just backlogs, right? This is all sorts of initiatives, right? Making that even worse when we look at this from a corporate perspective is actually often no one is in charge of placing the bet, right? There's a lot of people involved with execution, right? Go do this, go build this, go roll that out. But actually that step of, hey, what assumptions are we making and how do we make that bet smaller? And what do we want to wager on this particular assumption? No one really stops and thinks about that. And when I look into it, at least, I can't even find someone that actually owns these things. So this is the first of 4 things you do to prevent value delivery is you approach the world as a chess game when instead you should be approaching it as a poker game. So the solution here is really approach everything you know, every assumption you make, both in work and in private life, as risk and chance. right? I think I'm right. I'm going to make the right decision based on what I know today, but also realize that tomorrow you will have more information, and do not be afraid to revisit. And certainly don't go all in when you have the least amount of information. So that's one. How am I doing so far?
Pretty good, thank you.
A little bit more? A little bit more.
Oh,
Hey,
yeah.
Friday evening. Awesome.
All right.
Before we go to the bar playing poker.
So second story. So this was a few years ago. I was teaching an agile leadership class at a major insurance firm, and it was a good class to teach. I try to ask people not to read emails during classes, but unfortunately, no one ever listens to me. And at one point in this group of managers, one of them apparently got an email that was a little bit upsetting to them. And so they showed it to someone else, and they were all like, "Oh, this is very upsetting." And blah, 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 blah. And I asked, what's going on? What's getting you so upset? And they were like, "Oh no, it's internal stuff." And I'm like, "Well, it's clearly affecting the class, so maybe we can use this as a good teaching example." So what happened? Well, I got this email from one of my direct reports, and I'm like, "Sure." He wants a long weekend off. Okay. No, you don't understand. He wants the Friday and the Monday off. It's like, yeah, I know what a long weekend is. What's the problem? It's release weekend. It's all hands on deck. How dare he? Now, I was a bit stumped at this point. It had been a few years since I've come across an organization that still worked with release weekends, but it turned out that this organization, the systems they worked on, they would go live every 3 months or so, and they would do that in a weekend. Why? Because, well, usually what they released was garbage. Being very delicate here, of course, with my usual Dutch subtlety, but it resulted that when they put it in live on the Friday evening, they would then spend the Saturday and the Sunday fixing all of these issues that cropped up as people actually tried to use it. And so they needed everyone on board for this, right? Fix it as soon as possible. And I'm at one point, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, well, that's strange, right? I remembered from way back when I was a younger person at Hewlett Packard software, that they would do the same thing, and at that time I just thought it was normal. But here I really dove into that question of, but why do we have release weekends? Why did we create this whole structure for going live? Right? And what I found was it was the result of the politician's syllogism. Now there's a word. This is something that was made famous in the British comedy series Yes Minister, for the people in here that are like super duper old. I joke. I'm almost 36, so I am super duper old already. But anyway, the politician's syllogism kind of goes like this. There's a problem. Could be any kind of problem. But it's a problem, and the people in charge feel like we must do something. Right? We can't be seen to do nothing. This is something. Therefore, we're going to do this. So this all sounds a little bit nebulous, right? But let me give you one that probably a few of you are going to recognize. The organization is in trouble, ladies and gentlemen. We're too slow, our customers are unhappy, and our employees are abandoning us. We should be agile. Scrum is agile. Everyone's going to use Scrum from now on. So what had happened in this organization? Kind of the same thing. Hey, when we put this software live for our customers, we're seeing a lot of issues. How do we fix that? Well, we get a bunch of people to work throughout the weekend to fix the issues. All right, great. We'll set up a structure for it. We'll make sure they have overtime. We'll set up release weekends, and we'll tell people they can't go on a holiday. You know, the issue here is this is helicopter parenting, right? Because what is the real issue that they were solving? Was it a planning issue? Was it a resourcing issue? No, it was a technical issue, right? The quality was crap, right? But the moment you move the problem from the domain in which it can be solved, it can no longer be solved. It can only be managed, right? The moment you have a release weekend where you tell people stay in the office and work on fixing the bugs, you've also said to them, it's fine to deliver something crap because we have a system in place to fix the crap when we put it live, right? It's no longer a technical issue now, it's now a resourcing issue, right? So this impacts your ability to deliver quality. You've basically told the organization, hey, we've put a Band-Aid on this, we're now fixing the symptom, we're not fixing the problem. So actually, there's no need to deliver quality. Whatever sad bastards have to work throughout the weekend are going to fix the nasty things that you deliver to us. Right? So this ultimately is going to give you a culture of passivity and frustration, right? People won't care anymore because you've now made them not care. Right? And the reason I refer to helicopter parents here is because, well, in some societies, this is exactly what we've seen happen with helicopter parenting, right? Kid gets bad grades, so their parents come to school, they get angry with the teacher, and the grades get adjusted. Does the kid actually learn to fix anything themselves? No, they don't. Right? You've managed the symptom, you haven't managed the cause. Right? And the problem is, in all of this is happening with the absolute best of intentions, right? People don't do this to be malicious. People don't do this to feel more important. They come at this from the very best intentions, right? There's a problem. We need to be seen to do something because we can't just tell people, well, you go and fix it, right? But in the process of that, we've taken away people's agency. We've taken away their ownership, right? So the solution to this is simple. Just don't steal people's problems. Though I can tell you, in my professional career, when I listen to someone explain some of the challenges that they have, and I just go like, wow, that sounds really hard. Well, good luck with that. They don't always thank me for my wise advice. All right. Let's go on to another story. We're about halfway through. We'll see how far we get.
Will, room for question or later?
A bit later. Let's wait until after the session. But you can already note it down in the chat. My two wonderful, beautiful assistants will keep a running tally and remind me of them.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
All right.
Now we are only spamming in the chat, you know.
All right. So, once again, a story from my sordid past. I once got called into a German organization, and my hopes were high because, you know, German efficiency is legendary. It's so legendary, in fact, that my fiance is German. It's very efficient. She tells me everything I do wrong. I'm a better person because of it. But anyway, I come in, and what was the problem? They recently had to close down a project after about a year and a half because they were 10 million in the red on the whole thing. The reason they were 10 million in the red on the whole thing is they had spent 3 million euros developing something. Then they put it live. It was absolute garbage that actually resulted in them being sued by some of their customers for another 5 million. At which point they had to revert to their previous third-party solution, which cost them another 2 million. So naturally, I was brought in to have an opinion on these things and to basically point to who to execute. Like I said, German efficiency. So this was a mess, right? So I start looking into this. I talk to some of the developers, right? Developers point to their product owner. Well, we were given terrible things to build. Okay, go talk to the product owner. Yeah, I report into a steering committee, so I just wrote down what they told me to do. All right, great. Went to the steering committee. Yeah, we take our marching orders from the product director that owns all of this. So it's his choice is to go with this architecture and with these tools. All right, great. I talked to the product lead. He's like, no, I got the advice from architecture, from the enterprise architect and from some of the solution architects that this was the way that we wanted to go. So I go to the solution architects. Well, why did you make these choices? Oh, we trusted the developers, so we thought they were going to. We just took whatever they recommended. I went to the developers. Like, no. We just based our technology recommendations on what was in the product backlog. At this point, I walked that circle 3 more times, and when I tried to find accountability for this whole thing on who actually made these decisions and how were they made, this was the answer that I got. Right? Everyone was just pointing, well, I thought they were doing that. Recognizable? Right. So what's the challenge here? So this was an organization that came from a history of bureaucracy. And I think a lot of people get this wrong, right? We use this term bureaucratic quite a lot when we talk about very convoluted processes. But I actually spent some time into looking, well, what does that actually mean, right? What does it mean to be a bureaucratic organization? And this was quite fascinating to me, because bureaucracy is actually pretty old. And it's actually done a lot of good because it replaced the previous system, which was feudalism. It was basically your lord and ruler telling you whatever they wanted, and then people would go and do that, right? As best they can. And bureaucracy was kind of a way to, create a little bit of structure and continuity in those things that were important for any organization to run, whether that was a country or a municipality or a company. The issue behind it is bureaucracy came up in the late 1800s. And this was a time where a lot of people that were going to play a role in running an organization potentially didn't even know how to read or multiply. So the underlying theory of a bureaucratic setup is one of institutionalized incompetence, right? We are assuming that the people working here are incompetent. And so we have to limit the damage they can do. So we have to be super precise in this is what you do, this is what you're accountable for, and this is where you hand it over to someone else who does exactly that, what they're told to do, stays within what they're accountable for, and then hands it on to something else. So the result that you're aiming for, as described by the codifier of this topic, again, a German by the name of Max Weber, you kind of see a running theme here, is that the fully developed bureaucratic apparatus compares with other organizations exactly as does the machine with the non-mechanical modes of production. So the idea in a solid bureaucracy is that you've taken out all of the creativity, all of the innovations, and instead you've created a very predictable system where people are replaceable and where you assume that everyone is of limited competence. Right? So this is the context in which bureaucracy formed. Simple work, highly rational, highly repeatable, that allows for specialization. Right? So someone is good at their job and nothing else. And this simply doesn't work anymore. Right? Because, well, we don't work in a simple context, right? We're not playing chess, we're playing poker. So the challenge here is complexity requires speed for survivability. Remember, because we want to make small bets and we want to very quickly see if they were the right bets. The problem with speed is that if we want to go faster as an organization, we need more decision making at lower levels. And to add to that is we have to accept that some of the bets we make are going to be wrong, right? Because we are playing a game of imperfect information, right? So value delivery becomes a learning process, right? There's a lot of falling down, a lot of getting back up, also known as the Chumbawamba approach. And I will give a free hour of consulting to anyone that guesses that reference. You can post your answers in the chat.
I get knocked out, but I get up again.
That's the one. All right, so here's the challenge, right? So this company, they had gone and embraced agile ways of working. And they realized, okay, mistakes are going to be made as we go. So we have to accept that some failure is going to happen. The problem in all of this is they had taken a underpants gnome approach. Now, I hear you wondering, what do you mean with underpants gnome approach? It's from a South Park episode. All right. So in this episode, the kids in South Park, they find out that a lot of their underwear has gone missing, and at one point they find out it's a group of gnomes that are collecting all of the underpants for profit. And when they ask them, well, what does this business model look like? The gnomes will explain, well, phase 1 is we collect all of the underpants. And then phase 3 is profit. And throughout the entire episode, no one actually knows what phase 2 looks like. Now, I've seen this pattern repeated in this organization and in many other organizations that I work with, right? So what do? We increase the autonomy and responsibilities of people, right? We understand that we need faster decision-making at lower levels, right? We also understand that we need to increase tolerance for failure, right? Some of the decisions we make are going to be wrong, right? It's unavoidable. And then value. What's being forgotten here? What's being forgotten here is that when you come from a bureaucratic background, which is still the standard in many organizations, is your workforce is largely incompetent. Right? You've promoted specialization. You've told people over and over and over again, you do this, we will teach you to do this, you will not go outside of your lines, right? You hand it over. So suddenly we have people that have to make strategic choices around what product are we going to build? How are we going to build it? What technology choices do we make? Right? How do we set up the architecture? How do we ensure quality? That they have in no way been prepared for. Right? So the issue here is that failure is only a learning experience if the skill is there, right? If you know that the failure happens because the right choice was made with all of the information at the time and it just turned out to be wrong. But quite often, as is the case in this company, a lot of wrong choices were made by people that were just not competent enough to make those choices. And so hard as it is, the solution here is you need to manage for competence. Right? If you're going to give accountability to someone, if you're going to increase autonomy, if you're going to increase responsibilities, don't just assume that people have the right competence to handle those things. No, work with them to ensure that that happens. Last story. I was called into an organization. You kind of see a running theme here. I get called to a lot of organizations. It's because people love me. One of the teams there, I was invited by someone that I had trained a while ago, and he calls me up in a panic. He says we had a team collapse. I just go like, oh no, collapse? You say? Yes, collapse. I'm like, okay. Are they okay? Did they fall down in the office? Was there a gas leak? No. Their productivity collapsed. Like, oh, okay, sure. I'll come by. So I come in, and what had happened was this was a team that, and the management here was tracking the velocity of teams there, kind of the amount of units of work that they produced. They use something called story points, and this team had gone from delivering 30 points of work every 2 weeks to 8. And so there was panic. And they had sent an email to this team. They worked in a different location. They sent an email to this team, and the team said, no, everything's fine. And at that point, they stopped talking to that team because they were clearly lying, right? And they called me up like, we need you to go talk to these people. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I go, I plan a meeting with this team. Like I ask, can I have a chat with some of you? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I start that conversation on, well, what happened here? You went from 30 or 36 points a sprint to 7 or 8. And like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, listen, I don't care, because we're talking about work delivered here. We're not talking about value delivered. But yeah, it's causing some people to be upset, and that's causing them to pay me a lot of money. So thanks. But what happened? And they said, yeah, we stopped using story points. I'm like, well, that's cool. What do you use now? Let's go like, well, we just count the number of items. Okay, well, but the system is reporting story points. It's like, yeah, it's because we use Jira. It's like, oh, nemesis. All right, so the issue here, there was nothing wrong with this team, actually. They were delivering just as much as they were before. They just said, hey, we're wasting a lot of time trying to use these weird estimation tools, and instead we could just use flow metrics and measure the amount of items going through. That's not the point of this story. The point of this story was that when I reported this to the manager, and I said, well, they're not using story points anymore, that manager got a little bit confused and got a little bit upset. And he's like, well, how do I measure the performance of this team then? I go like, well, don't tell me you've been measuring their performance based on the amount of points they were delivering. It goes like, yeah, we do that with all our teams. I was like, but velocity is not a measure of value. It's only a measure of stuff. Right? Are you actually making something worthwhile for your customers? Like you're spending a certain amount of money each team on each sprint. Are you getting good ROI? Are your customers happy? And the response I got, ladies and gentlemen, it haunts me to this very day, because what they said was, we heard something about customers and costs once. So what was the problem here? Right. The problem was that this organization, they'd been trying to use agile ways of working in Scrum for give or take about 1.5 years at that point. And they'd gone through training, and they got professional coaches in, and all these trainings and coaches, they emphasized, you need to go talk to your customers. You need to go talk about value. But what they found was that was actually very hard to do. Because their teams weren't actually set up to deliver value. Their teams were set up to deliver things to other teams. And eventually the sum of those things would go to a customer. And, to have those conversations around, well, are we actually doing the right thing, would involve maybe setting up teams in a different way, or defining products in a different way, or, God forbid, pick up the phone and actually call a customer to ask them how they're doing. Right. Which was not done. Right. If you wanted to get in touch with a customer there, you had to go through actually 3 internal layers with marketing and with legal to see if they even allowed you to contact a customer. And what had happened was over time, this was so difficult that they gave up. And so they started measuring what they could instead, right? To at least get some idea of, are we doing the right things or not? Right? Because continuously trying to change the system, continuously asking these tough questions while the organization was going through a change, while customers demanded things, while your boss was standing at your desk asking you why things weren't delivered yet, it was just too hard. But that did lead me to ask the question of, but they know this isn't a measure of value, right? They know this is the wrong thing to do. Why fall back into these old habits? Right? And for that, I looked into some very old Nobel Prize winning research, as codified by Mr. Kahneman and Mr. Tversky, or I think Professor Kahneman and Professor Tversky. Don't quote me on that. Thinking Fast and Slow. And this is kind of, how do people work, right? Because the behavior I saw in this group of people was not rational. And it actually turns out that, to my surprise, humans actually aren't rational beings. It turns out that about 90%, 92% of all our behavior throughout the day is completely involuntary and completely instinctual. What we're dealing with is System 1 and System 2. Right? Most of the time, our brain is in System 1. System 1 is fast, right? It's automatic. It happens unconsciously. It uses minimal effort. Right? It's why all of you are currently thinking about a pink elephant right now. It's why all of you are suddenly now aware of your tongue in your mouth. Sorry about that. Right? System 1 uses pattern recognition. It's our built-in it's our built-in behaviors. Right? And your brain, once again, your brain, out of every organ in your body, absorbs the most energy. Right? And System 1 is very energy efficient. So your brain tries to be in System 1 most of the time. But sometimes something happens that System 1 can't solve. And then it has to call System 2. Right? System 2 is slow. It requires effort. Right? You know when you're using it, because it happens consciously. And it's very deliberate. Right? And you've seen this happen for yourself a few times. So if you've ever seen one of those escalators that has that's set up for flow, so where there's 2 feet on every step on the escalator on the right side, and then 1 foot alternating on the left side, right? With the idea of, if you want to go up the escalator without climbing up yourself, you stand on the right. And if you want to make speed, you go on the left. Well, what happens if someone goes stand still on the left? Right? You suddenly get annoyed, but you realize it very late, right? You're walking up and then suddenly, oh, there's this person in front of you. That's because your System 1 knows, hey, escalators on the left, speed lane, right? And if it isn't behaving as intended, it suddenly has to call System 2, right? And again, this is energy inefficient, right? So you don't like using System 2. Right? And I cannot stress this enough, that human beings, you included, unless there's aliens in the audience, in which case, cool. Human beings are optimized not to think. You are optimized not to think. Your brain spends a considerable amount of time every day not thinking. Right? It likes being on autopilot. Now, of course, the problem in most organizations is, when we want to change things, what do? Well, we talk. Right? We train people, coach them, we inspire them, we discuss, we intervene, we challenge the system. Recognizable? Right? We want to be seen to be doing something. We tell people, hey, next time someone goes over to you and asks you to do something, really think about what they want and why they want it. right? We're gonna do this new way of working. Everyone come in for a training. But the problem is, right? This is buffer overflow. This is all system 2. Right? When we train someone, when we talk to someone, when we intervene, when we facilitate a session, we're activating that part of the brain that the brain doesn't like using. We're activating the deliberate thoughts. Right? So this is all system 2. So what we're doing is we're increasing the cognitive load and energy expenditure of people. Right? Not only do you have to focus on your work, which for most of us is already cognitively hard to do, right? Most of us that do complex knowledge work already have to do hard things that we can't do on autopilot. And then asking people to also change the way they work just makes it harder, right? In the meantime, the environment around you actually doesn't change, right? We tell people, go work in teams. But your performance review will still be based around your individual performance. Oh, your bonus as well. Right? So now, all of these things that we have optimized for in our system 1, right? The kind of environment that we flourish in remains unchanged, but we're asking people to behave differently. Right? This creates a discrepancy. And the problem is, as soon as stress increases, right? Delivery is late, customers are unhappy, getting worried about our performance review, getting worried about our career prospects. What happens, right? We fall back. We fall back in the patterns that we know. Not because we want to, not because it's better that way. It's because it's easier. It's because it's less stressful. All right, so how do you escape this? Well, this isn't how you escape that. Again, we want to make it easier for people to show the kind of behavior that we want to see. We want to make it easier for people to focus on value delivery. Right? So what we want to do is we want to alter their environment. Right? We want to influence system 1 without engaging system 2. We want to make it so that it is easier for people to work in teams than individual. How do we do that? Well, we don't do it by telling them to work in teams. No, we do it by setting things up in such a way that it is natural to work in teams. Right? If we want people to focus on value delivery, right? Make it so that it is easy to focus on value delivery. Bring them closer to their customers. Right? Report on quality, not on amount of stuff done. Right? If we want people to focus on collective results, don't give individual bonuses. Right? And this whole field is described in depth in Nudge Theory by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. So summarizing all of this, right? What are the 4 things that you need to change? What are the 4 things that you do to prevent value delivery? You need to stop playing chess and start playing poker. Right? Realize that the quality of an outcome doesn't tell you anything about the quality of a decision. So focus on making better decisions. And the only way you can actually judge if you're making better decisions is place more bets. Right? Make sure you can evaluate them more and more often. Right? Solve your own problems. Don't steal someone else's. Stop tolerating incompetence. Right? If you delegate something to someone, if you expect them to do something, make sure that they are competent to do those things. And don't bother people. Right? Before you train someone or coach them or tell them to really be mindful of all their behavior every day, look at the environment. Can you make it easier for someone to show the kind of behavior that you want to see? All right, so that's been about an hour at this point. So yeah, like I promised, here's the other cat. This is Lord Wobbles von Katzenstein. If you want to get in touch with me, you can do so through LinkedIn. You can send me an email. Please don't call me. I hate getting calls on my phone. And if you ever come across me in real life, just give me a holler. It's fine. And at this point, let's open the floor to questions. After the applause, of course.
Thanks a lot, Will. I enjoyed it a lot personally. Thanks a lot. Maybe while people are thinking about questions, I can share one more story, because when you were telling those stories, I had flashbacks to all the stuff that you see in the organizations and you cannot unsee. So I especially liked about the management style. We have a problem, we have to do something about that. So let's do something. So I joined a bank, and whomever coached a bank or was a consultant in a bank while they're transforming into more agile ways of working, it's always an awesome experience. So imagine it was second or third day being in that bank, and the person who hired me said, look, we have a product and they are scaling. I'm like, okay, that's already sounds interesting. So you have to go there and take a look. They have daily Scrum starting in 15 minutes. So I'm going over there. Of course, there is manager at Scale Daily Scrum. How he cannot be there, and it is a mess. And I'm super glad consultant who has the notebook, and I'm writing down stuff that I'm hearing, just like observations, and it is a mess. And at some point, the manager stands up and says, "Okay, people, listen to me for a bit. I hear you are complaining about the problems. I get it. It's hard. But please, let's try to focus on solutions to those problems. Tell me, please, how can I help you?" And I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds nice. And I'm surprised. I'm actually, looking at the manager, and then I'm looking at people standing over there, and they're super silent, and they have eyes like this, and I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the situation to unravel, and I already have very high expectation of what the manager is going to say. Maybe he's going to ask some powerful questions. And he did ask the powerful question. He changed the tone, and then he said, "Tell, how can I help you? I don't know. What do you need? Maybe the permission to stay longer at the office. Maybe the permission to come and work during the weekend. Just tell me, I will guarantee that you get that." And I'm like, okay, that's why they were resilient to answer. It was Friday. So they have been trying to come up with a solution. Of course, in 10 minutes, there was a great PowerPoint presentation for the CIO. And later on, they had a meeting with the CIO, of course, with a nice Gantt chart, what they're going to do about this. And, I'm a consultant. I can go there as well, just to say, to observe. You know what's going to happen over there, but you just, you're curious about what's going to be, what's it going to be, what's it going to be. So we're going over there. The CIO is sitting, and he's scrolling through the presentation like, So from what I'm seeing, it looks realistic that you might accomplish it. And they're like, yeah, we have planned everything out. It's okay. And the CEO then says one great phrase. But remember, today we have Friday, but tomorrow and the day after tomorrow are also days that you might spend working. And the answer from people was, yeah, we have planned it out. So some people will gonna come to the office, some people are gonna stay and work from home, but we have everything figured out. And I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah. So, and this kind of goes into Greg's question. I saw in the chat is, the real issue here is, look at the type of problem that you're facing, right? So in this example, we had a technical problem, right? The quality was low. But instead of attacking that problem, right, quality, which is very much in the technical domain, it was lifted into a management domain, right? We need to allow for people to work in the weekends.
Yeah.
So at that point, you can't solve the problem anymore because you've taken it from the domain in which it can be solved and you've taken it to a domain in which it can only be managed. Right. So were you what you could have done instead in solving it without stealing that problem but still helping people is sit with them and say, okay, can we invest in increasing your quality assurance skills? Do you not know how to set up good tests? Can we set up an automating testing infrastructure, right, to make sure that it was stable by the time it went live? They did none of those things. They didn't solve the underlying issue.
Exactly.
They said, no, we need people to firefight on the weekends.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. So it's almost like management responded with their, I don't know, usual category of solutions, as opposed to really, because even the thing you said, okay, let's look into the root cause. Maybe you need more QA skills, whatever. That is kind of a nice management response to that particular problem that could help in actually, right? At least
that is helping someone without stealing the issue.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really helping them. Yeah. But they still own it, and they are still accountable for fixing that in the long run.
We see this in HR as well, right? Ideally, we want teams to interview their own members, right? If they have to grow or if they have to replace someone. Most of the times, teams are not equipped to do those things, right?
Okay.
They lack the competence, and sometimes we let that happen, and it goes really, really bad. But in other cases, we might say, you know what? You don't do the hiring. We'll set up this other group of people that'll do the hiring for you, right? Yeah. Now, I'm never going to solve the problem that they can't do their own hiring because they don't know how to set that up in an objective and non-biased way. I've stolen that problem from them. And now I have this group of people that isn't related to that team that suddenly has to select people for that team.
Or interesting point to this, or, like something that really happens commonly, you would have line manager involved as well as HR involved. So you have two groups of people who focus on recruitment from their specialization. That's cool. And that works, but the issue is that the process simply gets longer.
Yeah.
If you would have helped the business to hire high quality candidates themselves, then you would make it quick, efficient, pleasant for everyone, actually.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, so that is the core problem with problem theft.
Yeah.
Is equip the people that are involved in that problem, right? Where the root cause is, to solve the root cause instead of taking it from them. And like I said, this happens with all the right intentions, and that's what makes it so hard to point it out when it's happening.
Well, of course, yes, of course.
All right. Other questions, wonderful audience?
Mine just got answered by Greg's question. So yeah, sorry. But thank you very much for the speech and for all the fun and jokes that you have.
Yeah. Certainly, yeah, definitely entertaining, good stuff. And interesting too, of course.
Okay, then while you're thinking about questions, I cannot keep silent, and I also want to share one short story, quite related to previous few. So I was hired to help 4 teams in outsourcing software development in Kyiv, working for a huge US enterprise. And the request was like, you need to go and see and propose a better way to implement agile ways of working. We are not planning to implement Scrum by book, but it should be somehow iterative and looks like Scrum. So go see and tell them what to do. I say, no, it doesn't work like that. I am not ready to work exactly like you asked, but I can make some observations, assessment, and form some hypotheses together with teams on overall retro at the end, and they will prioritize this list and choose on what they want to work on. And you as sponsors and senior management could support these initiatives or not. Invest more time and money or not. They say, okay, do whatever is needed, but the limit of work for you is 20 hours. I say, okay, I will try to carefully spread this 20 hours to be at least somehow valuable for people, for teams, for stakeholders, and at the same time be in the budget. So it was a fixed scope, fixed budget, fixed expectations contract, so to say. After 2 weeks, I finished like 6 or 7 interviews one-on-one with people, also visiting a few key Scrum events and provide one retrospective with them. So it was half of budget done, so to say. One of the senior vice president of something from client US side said that he want to speak with me to better understand where is the transparency of our current agile transformation project. So to say, I was a little bit surprised that I am taking part in their agile transformation, but it was top news, hot news in the list of news for me. And second one was like, he said, why I want to speak with you, because I cannot see any changes during these 2 weeks. You have spent already half of the time, and I cannot see much difference how it was and how it come. So what are you planning to do next weeks to make sure that I will get some outcome? I said, oh, pretty awesome. Okay. Can you tell me a bit of your previous experience with agile transformations? Maybe he said, yeah, I was working in big, I don't want to say the name of this country, but very big outsourcing country, and we've made several agile transformations, and I want to see a sprints in Jira, I want to see story points, where all the stuff, when I will see it. And I say, okay, let's put it in pause. Can you explain me what is your ideal Scrum team? What you want to get? What is your North Star? Where we are driving the teams towards which expectations of you. And he said like, yeah, I can explain, it's very easy. They should be self-managed, self-organized, initiative, propose solutions, not talking about problems. I want to see smile on their faces and readiness to cope with any challenge, not like complaining and like not being ready to overtime and all this stuff. I say, okay, very nice. I can see this picture. I was scribing for him. So is this a picture? He said, yeah. I said, okay, from 0 to 10, can you evaluate the current state of each of 4 teams? He said, yeah, it's very easy. 3, 3.5 maybe, 3 and 6 for this team. I said, okay, what are the difference between these teams in structure, maybe processes? This team have more front-end guys, so they don't have dependencies. But it's crap. No, it's not because of that. It's because there are different kind of people. So maybe we should shuffle the teams, he said. So we will take people from most proactive team and put in every team, like like a liquid. So you will put more proactive people and all of them become more proactive team. I say, okay, let's talk about another stuff. What have you made during last 2 weeks while I was in observing mode? What do you think? Can I ask you a question? Which could negatively affect the direction or the dynamic of the change of these teams? Maybe some feedback sessions, maybe some occasions, maybe some open questions from you, which could not help them to move towards the North Star, but preventing them from. He said, no, I cannot. I cannot even imagine about such an actions. Then I asked, can I give you some examples from my observation? He said, yeah, I'm fully open. I said, okay, it was your choice. I've asked for permission first, so now I can do it legally. And I give him a few examples. He was shocked and surprised, like, oh, really? Do you believe that it somehow negatively affects them? I was trying to motivate them, to show them that my expectation is much higher than they are currently doing. I said, okay. And another question, what have you done during the last 2 weeks to help them, to support them on the way of change? Maybe you also have some positive examples. And you know what was the answer? He said, I've hired you, Artem. So now it's your job. So 20 hours, 4 Scrum teams, like 25 people, no involvement, and like now it's your duty. I'm done. In my checklist, I'm done. Yeah, afterwards was more positive story, but I don't want to waste your time. We have a lack of time, but yeah, sometimes people try to solve not their problems and ignore the problems which are exactly on their plate, and they should take accountability for it, I believe.
And I think
So,
you also
thank you.
stressed. I think you stressed the importance of supportive management style. That approach where you really focus on people who actually do something, and you step back, right? That's something that seems to be really way more efficient than directive approach.
Yeah, and it was really hard for me, you know, because 5 years ago I will come to his office and I will say, stop do this, you should do this instead, and I will be kicked off in a few minutes from his office. So now I am become, how will you call it? An old and almost 30, how many, 34 years guy. So I try to become more careful and more calm.
Mm.
Yeah. I call it respect the pace of change of organization.
Well,
They cannot change with pace I'm expecting.
and that's the thing, right? Is you know, if I hope you take anything away from all of these stories, it's 99% of people that you encounter in your work really mean the best.
Yeah.
Right? They get up with the best of intentions, they do their work with the best of intentions, and they are not against you. But everyone struggles with their own biases, with their own histories, and with the system they are in and the kinds of behaviors that have been taught to them. So the easiest thing to do is, and this is why this learning about System 1 and System 2 is so interesting, is we judge others as if they're rational beings, right? As if every choice they make is a deliberate choice. Right, and they get and they come to work with the intention of, I'm going to make as many people miserable as I can. Right, the reality is many of us are just trapped in patterns. Right, they're trying their best, but most of the stuff is there because we learned through years and years and years that this is the kind of behavior that is easiest. Right, so when someone shows counterproductive behavior, or when you find yourself becoming exasperated with someone, right, take a step back and look at, well, what is the system that this person is in? What are they being rewarded for? What are they being punished for? And how did they get to where they are? Right? So you can understand these people so that you can then find out, okay, if I want to see change, if I want to work with these people, right, if I want to enable them to find better ways of working, how do I make that easier for them without telling them change what you do? Because they do what they do because it works that way.
Yeah. It's a great point. How I helped them after, I explained exactly the same, like you are usually doing something with good intentions. So let's analyze this. And on retrospective, I've proposed them to collect a lot of events, positive and negative, from latest months, and to analyze why first what has happened, like what's the event, not talking about people, and second one, why it usually happens, what for, like we're working on weekends, what for, with which intention, what we're trying to achieve. And the next question, when they can find these answers, like what impacts and negative effects it has on product quality, delivery, and customers, and on people, all people. Like we have good intentions, but which side effects it has. And when they see the effects, I propose them how to achieve desired output of this event without negative impacts. And going through these 3 stages helps them to analyze, like, yeah, we're trying to achieve something good, but also we're impacting negatively some important elements of the systems, and how we can avoid the negative elements, but also achieving at least some part of the desired outcome. So if you want to know more about this retro, I've spent a few minutes and found it on my LinkedIn. So, yeah,
Nice.
Thank you, Will. It was really entertaining and positive. I was smiling even with all this mosquito in my rooms. So, yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. I hope everyone donated generously, and yeah, all
not
the best.
Everyone, not yet.
And let's hope that this whole thing will be over soon.
Oh yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everybody, for being here. Thanks a lot, Will, once again. It was really awesome.
Yeah, and we're waiting for all of you on Monday.
Yep, that is true. On Monday, we have another meetup, another interesting topic, and we will have 2 speakers on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Right, 2.
Yeah, it will be a mix of CST from Scrum Alliance and PST from Scrum.org. a friendship of alliances and organizations. Yeah, it will be Alexei Krivitsky from Scrum Alliance and Roland Flem from Scrum.org.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And have a great weekends if you have weekends in your country still.
Busy with going live, huh?
Okay.
Stop recording.